A key question in Hillary Clinton's email scandal. Did she sign a separation form and commit perjury as she left the State Department? That form would have required her to certify that she had surrendered all of her work-related documents to the agency before leaving.
The form itself says, hey, before you sign this, understand that you are certifying something that we can prosecute you for. Making a false statement in this context, knowingly and willfully, which I can't imagine anything more knowing and willful than knowing you have 55,000 records sitting in your home. If you do that, it is a felony.
That night, we asked the State Department a very simple question. Did she sign OF 109 or didn't she? They didn't answer. The next day, we asked again at the State Department briefing.
I think this has been asked. It was more than 2 years ago. I don't have an update on that specific question at this point.
The day after that,
I don't have an update on that.
Meanwhile, our own Ed Henry taking our question straight to the source.
Hello, Madam Secretary. Did you sign the separation statement before you left state? Did you sign that statement?
They either don't know whether she signed that OF 109 or they know and they won't tell us. But somebody at State is putting poor Jen Psaki in a terrible position.
Well, absolutely. I mean, if Mrs. Clinton did not sign that document, then she stole federal documents from the federal government. If she did sign that document, she committed perjury, because the document says, I certify that I have surrendered everything to you. Before she leaves the building, on her last day in office, she's supposed to sign that document. And an official of the State Department is supposed to sign another document saying, I certify as, and fills in his or her title.
And guess
that
what?
The Secretary of State left all of her documents with me.
And guess
Where's
what?
that file?
In the meantime, her other story appears to be falling apart. Why she did this in the first place. I mean, she came out and said it was for convenience, which a lot of people doubted.
She was clear as can be
She's
that it
a
was for
Clinton.
convenience.
She's a Clinton.
She didn't want to carry two BlackBerries with her, even though we know during much of her professional life she carried two.
Right. The Clintons have been through a lot of investigations, so a lot of people had questions about whether this convenience excuse was real. Listen to what she said last week and listen to what Carville said on Sunday.
I opted for convenience to use my personal email account because I thought it would be easier to carry just one device.
I suspect she didn't want Louis Gohmert rifling through her emails, which seems to me to be a kind of reasonable position for someone to take.
Well, now that reference to Louis Gohmert rifling through her emails is a reference to congressional oversight. Congressman Gohmert, a former judge, is on the House committee to which the Secretary of State reports in justifying her behavior.
She didn't want him rifling through.
Well, then she shouldn't have become the Secretary of State.
In a letter to the State Department Inspector General, Senator Chuck Grassley suggested that State has not complied with its obligations, and he is now demanding answers. In addition, he is demanding that the Inspector General confirm that, quote, Secretary Clinton did not sign a separation statement, and if not, why?
Did she protect classified information? You know, it would be illegal for Hillary Clinton to have sent classified information even if she had used an official State Department account. There's a separate classified email system called the SIPRNet, which is supposed to be used for all the rules say all classified information has to go over the SIPRNet. But she didn't even follow the rules when it came to using an official account, so why should we believe that she didn't do it when it came to classified information? So these are questions that need to be answered.
You know, Robert, it seems like the walls are closing in. You know, you've got Gowdy, who's pushing for that server. You've got now the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee demanding that the Inspector General provide actual written answers to Congress that has oversight responsibility. Are we going to get that server or aren't we?
You know something? The issue is not about Hillary Clinton. This is about the lack of integrity, the lack of decency of these Republican leaders. And the reality here is, while you're targeting Hillary Clinton, she not only followed the same protocol that Condoleezza Rice and Colin Powell followed.
No,
unlike
she didn't.
Colin Powell, unlike Colin Powell, she turned over all her personal emails. And the reality here,
No,
Megan,
she didn't.
are you
kidding me?
These are lies.
Don't interrupt me,
Did
Mark.
Condi Rice have a homebrew server? I missed that.
Colin Powell had a personal email account, and he destroyed all his personal emails that dealt with government business. Hillary Clinton turned over her personal emails to the State Department, or government emails rather, and that was what she was required to do. The reality here is the fact that you don't focus on Condoleezza Rice or Colin Powell and choose to attack Hillary Clinton just shows how partisan the charade is.
The difference is that neither Condoleezza Rice nor Colin Powell did all of their emailing business on their own homebrew server. And that's the distinction here, Robert. The reason all of their documents were in the custody of state. No one had to ask for them back.
That's incorrect, Megyn.
No, it is not incorrect.
Powell destroyed all his emails relating to state government business.
He did his official business on his official state email. No one is claiming that Hillary was not allowed to use personal email for anything. But everyone, to a man, other than in Hillary Clinton's camp, has said it was highly unusual, irregular, and unprecedented for her to do what she did by controlling everything and having it off-site.
Megyn, we just spoke with Richard Higbee, the State Department's lead criminal investigator in the Dallas field office. Higbee has spent 17 years working for the arm of the State Department that both investigates crimes and protects diplomats overseas. But he is not beholden to the State Department officials. Instead, he's been at odds with them for most of his career for blowing the whistle on federal workers who do not play by the rules. And he says when it comes to signing the now famous OF-109 form, the separation agreement that Hillary Clinton did not sign, there is a huge double standard. Listen.
When they want it to be a rule or a policy, they make it a policy. So in my experience, there's been no uniform, unbiased application of the rules. It's been very prejudicial.
But State Department spokesperson Jen Psaki indicates that the form may not be such a big deal after all, saying she's not aware of a penalty for not signing or that it's a rule violation. Listen to her.
It's not clear that this form is used as part of a standard part of checkout across the federal government or even at the State Department, so we're certainly looking into that.
Higbee says in his experience, departing employees don't have a choice in the matter. They have to verify that they have surrendered all unclassified documents and papers they acquired while they were employed or else.
The reason why everyone's going to sign that document is because they need their retirement, they need their benefits. You know, all those things are going to be held up because the separation agreement is the first part of the process.
And if you don't sign, you are likely to be the focus of a State Department investigation on why you didn't sign. Megyn.
Trace, thank you. Ms. Psaki today attempted to suggest that secretaries of state get special privileges upon departure and don't have to certify before they leave that they have surrendered all of their documents. Listen.
Secretaries of state often do not sign this form as it is a step to revoking their own security clearance. There's a long tradition of secretaries of state making themselves available to future secretaries and presidents, and secretaries are typically allowed to maintain their security clearance and access to their own records for use in writing their memoirs and the like.
Legal experts say that's complete nonsense. One does not surrender one's security clearance by signing a form that merely confirms all federal records have been returned. One only confirms that one is not a thief.
Well, nothing about the way this whole thing has been handled at the State Department inspires any confidence at all. First of all, the question was posed to the State Department many days ago about whether Hillary Clinton had signed the form that you're talking about. There was no answer for days. Now, look, that's the kind of a question that an information officer at a senior level of the State Department should be able to get an answer to in a matter of a couple of hours or at the most half a day. It took several days. Why, one is tempted to ask? Well, one possible answer is that they decided they're going to take some time to get their story straight and perhaps, just perhaps, work things out with the Clinton camp as to what they ought to be saying.
A key part of Mrs. Clinton's defense is that, quote, the vast majority of the emails that she was keeping on her own private server and not on the government system were nonetheless captured by the feds because she emailed staffers on their government accounts. But that may not be true. See, the Clinton team recently delivered roughly 300 emails to a House committee investigating Benghazi. And it turns out many of those were sent from Hillary's private account to the private accounts, private, not state, of her top people. Fox News senior judicial analyst Judge Anna Napolitano joins me now. I thought this was her record-keeping attempt.
Do you think she knew that when she said the emails that I got came from the government and my replies went to the government? Guess what? Many of her senior aides used the same server that she used, her husband's server. So her statement that all of the emails, or the vast majority of the emails that I dealt with, were preserved on a government server were not true, and she knew it was untrue when she was doing it, and she knew it was untrue when she stated it at the UN. 66,000 emails in the time that she was Secretary of State. She admits to deleting 33,000 and surrendering 300. Anybody can do the math. That is not a decision for her to make.
If the public believes that it is reasonable for her to turn over that server, which contains public information, to a neutral, detached arbiter, not Congress, but a retired judge or an archivist or an inspector general, then she'll be forced to do so. Otherwise, the House as an institution may be forced to go to court to try to get access to that.
Hillary Clinton's lawyer has now responded in writing to a congressional request that she turn over her private email server to a neutral third party who could determine whether or not all of her work emails, the public's documents, have indeed been turned over to investigators and to the State Department. Her legal team flatly ruling that out, saying turning over the server is entirely pointless because she already wiped it clean. Lawyers writing, quote, "There are no HDR22, that's her emails from Secretary Clinton's tenure as Secretary of State on the server for any review, even if such review were appropriate or legally authorized." Of course, this does nothing to answer the biggest questions, and in fact, it creates many more questions. She said that she deleted her personal emails at her presser, but now her lawyer has come out and said, and as for that server, which normally would have a record of deleted emails, he says it has been wiped clean. There is no remaining documentation and nothing on the server that would show us what happened to them. That's what he claims.
Well, technically, we don't know if it's been wiped clean, but let's take his argument at its face value that they wiped it clean. The question is, when did they do it? She was subject to a letter sent to her by Congressman Chaffetz, chairman of a House committee, in September 2012, while she was still the Secretary of State, demanding all records and documents reflecting Benghazi. She was then
that would have encompassed emails. There's no question.
Oh, absolutely. Well, he used the word records, and he used the word records in the same definition that the statute does, which includes electronic records.
Exactly. The law is very clear that records includes emails.
That's a letter which puts a lawyer, Mrs. Clinton, and her staff
on notice.
Mills, I forget her first name. Cheryl Mills was her chief.
Uma Abedin.
Correct, they're all lawyers. Puts them on notice that they have to preserve the documents. 11 months later, in August of 2013, she's out of office, John Kerry is now in. The State Department receives 2 subpoenas from Congressman Darrell Issa. Not letters, subpoenas, essentially asking for the same thing. 2015 begins and a new Congress starts. So she's going to say that she no longer had the obligation in 2015 to comply with letters or subpoenas served in 2012,
That's ridiculous.
13, or 14.
Well, the interesting thing is, when she defends herself, she doesn't come off as somebody who believes she's innocent. She comes off as somebody who knows she's guilty, but is operating under the assumption that nobody cares. And that assumption is fortified by a media.
According to Trey Gowdy, Hillary Clinton wiped her email servers clean after being under a congressional subpoena. Even the liberal left is starting to push back, asking the right question, what was she thinking?
That's so bad.
She was notified about the request from the State Department, and then it gets scrubbed clean. It's called consciousness of guilt, because now you can't even look for it. So is that the same as guilty conscience? It is, but we call it consciousness of guilt.
So even the most ardent supporter of Hillary Clinton has to be like, you did what? Wait.
Which I am.
So after you got the notification, then you went and scrubbed the server.
Right.
What messages does that send?
So are you pushing back?
I am pushing back. There's no excuse for this. I mean, come on. I can't sit here with a straight face and say wiping your server when there's an investigation going on. Actually, I would say wiping your server under any circumstances is not something one does unless they have something to hide, right? I don't even know where my server is, but if I were to find it, I'm sure I could wipe it.
That's actually the definition of consciousness of guilt.